We were born in 1997. We inherited a governor's mansion that was controlled by somebody not known to be a friend to the LGBT community. The far right had seized control of the House and the Senate. We are a nonpartisan organization. We said we're going to reach out to everybody. We're going to expect the best from everyone. And we didn't always get the best. I remember that in those early days, we were fighting amendments to bills that equated gay people with necrophilia and bestiality. We found a lot of enemies, but we also found friends in places that we had not expected. I remember our deputy director sat down with a Republican legislator who had for years been a real opponent of ours. And he was talking to her about our anti-bullying bill. And midway through the conversation, she just said, you know what, I need to tell you, my son just came out to me, and I'm having a real hard time dealing with it. And what began as a simple lobby visit became something much more important, much more human and real. And that legislator, who had been a nemesis of ours, became a real ally. First behind the scenes, helping us plot strategy, and then in front of the scenes as a co-sponsor of legislation to repeal the adoption ban. We found many people. I remember there was a lesbian couple from Orange County who came up to lobby on the adoption repeal, and they had been kicked out of a legislator's office. Now this was kind of unheard of. Even the most horrible anti-gay legislators tend to sit and smile and nod inscrutably, and then you leave. And for him to stand up, walk to the door, and gesture for them to leave was kind of shocking. So this had happened. It was sort of surprising. And then I had the last meeting of the day. We ended up getting a meeting after everybody had to leave, and so I go into this conservative Republican's office, and I say, I'm here to talk to you about the adoption ban. He gets up from his desk, he starts walking to the door, and I think, oh my God, twice in one day? And instead he closes the door, and he sits back down, and he says, listen, you don't have to tell me how bad this adoption ban is. I know. He said, my daughter's best friend lives right next door, has two moms. They're great parents. My daughter spends sleeps over. These are great parents. I know how awful this ban is. And he said, you may think I'm a coward, but I'm not going to stick my neck out because I won't survive the primary if I do. But if it gets to the floor, I'll vote the right way because I wouldn't be able to look my daughter in the eyes. Those kinds of conversations happen all the time. And if you ask me, am I depressed? Are we cynical about what's going to happen? No, because you know what? It's always been this way. The climb has always been tough in Tallahassee. It has always been hard in Tallahassee, and yet we've still carved out victories. And not just in Tallahassee, but all across Florida, we have carved out victories in unexpected territory. More than half the state's population now lives in a community that has a human rights ordinance that includes sexual orientation, and most of them now include sexual orientation and gender identity. And it's because of the work of OADO here, it's because of the work of volunteers, staff, and community leaders, allies all across the state. Right now, more than half the students in the state of Florida go to schools that have anti-bullying protections that include sexual orientation, and more than half of those also include gender identity, because we fought in Tallahassee year after year to make bullying visible and make people accountable. We protect more students with specific anti-bullying policies at the local level more than any other states except California and New York. We're winning even in hostile climates. We're winning because we are electing more LGBT elected officials at the local level. And by being there, and Cheryl, you're a perfect example in Kissimmee of what it means to have people who live open, authentic, and honest lives, transforming the people around them. And so here's the message that I want to deliver. We are winning. And in fact, it is my firm belief that winning ultimately is assured. The die is already cast. The education necessary to transform not just our state, but our nation is already in progress. The children of gay parents have come of age, they're voting age. They're telling their own stories. The lies that people have said about us for decades no longer hold up because we've come out and we've challenged those with our lives. So the question for me is not, are we going to win? It's how quickly. Will it be 20 years? Will it be 10 years? Will it be 5 years? My dream, my ultimate goal, is for there to come a day, sooner rather than later, when somebody tries to explain that there was a time that an organization called Equality Florida had to exist. And for the young person hearing this story to be unable to fathom a world in which such an organization was necessary. And that day is coming. And it is our job, those of us in this room, not to give in to cynicism, not to be defeated or set back by any election, this last one or one in the future. It is about all of us understanding that our job, our task, day in and day out, is to hasten that day. We can't afford the luxury of being cynical. The adoption ban fell this year, September 22nd. Mark it on your calendar. Toast it every year. It fell because really smart attorneys from the American Civil Liberties Union went to court to defend a dad who was protecting his kids. It fell, someone said to me, why this one? Why this case? How come we lost time and time again, but this time we won? We won because we changed the context in which that case was fought. We changed it by telling our stories. We changed it by going to Tallahassee and lobbying year in and year out. We changed it by shifting public opinion. For the first time, public opinion is on our side. More than half the state, more than 55% of Floridians say the ban is wrong and shouldn't exist. And we changed it by challenging them to defend it in any forum. When Representative Scott Randolph took the floor on the day that we were successful in getting an amendment on the House and on the Senate floor on the same day, calling for a repeal of the adoption ban, when Scott Randolph stood up and called the ban out, not one person stood up to defend it. On the Senate side, when 6 senators stood up to talk about how this ban tears families apart, not one senator stood up to defend it, because it's indefensible. When George Reekers was the only witness that the state could scrounge up to try and defend it, he had been discredited long before he got his picture taken with a rent boy in an airport. Right? And that story might have just been one more pathetic story about somebody, sublimating their own internal conflict into anti-gay behavior. It's an old story. We've heard it a lot in Florida. But we did a public records request and discovered that the state had paid him not the astonishing $60,000 that was being reported, but $120,000. And suddenly, what had been a bit of a scandal became a political scandal. And I would argue that the reason that Bill McCollum, Attorney General, is not governor of Florida right now is because he hitched his wagon to some of the most ugly anti-gay rhetoric out there. And in fact, Rick Scott's very last mailer, when the polls called it too close to call or even gave McCollum the edge, was to wrap the Reeker scandal around him. And if Bill McCollum had been heading to the general election instead of Rick Scott, he would have pushed this thing to the Supreme Court. But instead, right now in the state of Florida, and since September 22nd, no longer you have to check a box that says, are you a homosexual, yes or no? Are you a bisexual, yes or no? A law that had stood for 33 plus years in the state of Florida was finally gone. So here's the big message that I want to leave you with. We're winning. We're winning day in and day out. It's going to be tough in Tallahassee, but it's never not been tough for us. It has, we can't afford to be cynical, because there is a 13-year-old in a school in Bay County who is counting on us to ensure that the anti-bullying policies that exist in Broward and Hillsborough and Pinellas and other places across the state reach her. There's a lesbian couple that's celebrating their 50th anniversary tomorrow that's counting on us to ensure that they are respected as a couple. There are, across this state, bullies in school that unless we change the culture and climate, they will be the perpetrators of the next hate crimes. We cannot afford the luxury of being cynical, because there's too much work to do, and when we work at this together, we win.